Today, I want to talk about Application Insight. So, Application Insight is Azure PaaS offering. It's a service which is built and managed by Azure. Now, what exactly Application Insight does is it fundamentally helps in application logging and telemetries, and also it produces an insight which is much more visual and also much more clear for end user to directly get the detail and react on those insights. Now, application insight, as I said, it's logging and telemetry, but it would not be a valid justification because it has much more to that. It is even capable of processing and managing the user data and all the stuff which you have been hearing in the news of recent about the Google, Facebook, and Twitter. They are extracting user data and user location and all that stuff, and based on that, they produce advertisement and all that. Now, I won't talk about those specific attributes because I would like to focus on the application side of things. So historically, if you would have been building applications, logging and telemetries are one of the fundamental core component for any application design because they are the things which help you in analyzing issues which normally comes up in production and all that stuff. Now, you can work out an application without a logging or telemetry, but I believe then you would be just falling into a trap of not getting insights on what's happening inside the black box on the server, and that's really not helpful when you are in a production scenario. So historically, we have been using Log4j or Log4j for such things, and then that used to basically produce a trace of whatever activities are happening inside the code. And then if there are any issues reported or exceptions reported, then the user or the particular administrator of application was able to log in on the machine, and then he used to check some logs over there. And based on the log validation, he used to predict the reasoning and then the mitigation and all that stuff. Now, this was a very cumbersome process because you need to have access to the servers where the application is running. You need to have the access of logs, and then after even having the log access, you need to heaps of time to just go through each log item and identify the problem. Now, considering all these challenges, what Microsoft came up was that if you start floating uh, your telemetries and your stream of events which are happening in the application side to the application insight service, then what this service will do is it will start consolidating and organizing and massaging your telemetries, and then it will basically produce a real-time report for you which you can see in a single glance and identify if there are any issues or if something is not going as it should go. So yeah, on the deck you can see there are three fundamental steps. So the first step is collection of telemetry, which is done on the application side. The second step is processing the telemetries, which is massaging the data and organizing it. And the third stage is presenting a 360 view of the telemetry, which would be a graph or table, much more easy to understand and investigate. So, so the next I would like to show about how exactly the application inside works and where exactly it sits. So take for an example, you have an application which you can see on the left hand side. It's a web application. It has a client side web application, which is HTML. Then there is a service side, which is in the middle, and then there is a backend system. Now, at each of these levels, you can very easily integrate Application Insight because Application Insight has full capacity to to receive a stream or telemetry stream from a JavaScript or through a C# code or a Java code or Python, Ruby, all the good stuff which you can think of. All these languages are supported by Application Insight, and there are code samples which you can directly integrate. Now, once the data is received by Application Insight, it basically massages it and processes it, and then it has a dashboard available at the Application Insight service level, where you can go and have a glance of all this. But I think so. Then Microsoft took it to the next level, which is more about what if I don't go to these dashboards and see it? Can there be a proactive notification and stuff which I can consume and then process and just focus on these issues if they really happen. Otherwise, I should not bother about getting onto the application inside dashboards. So in order to cope up with that particular use case, What Application Insight also integrates with is alerts. So there are Azure alerts. You can integrate your Azure alerts with Application Insight, and based on CPU usage, exceptions, or yeah, your performance of the system, any of these factors, and much more, you can create alerts. So if something goes beyond what you want, then it will basically create an alert, which can be in the form of a telephone call, or it can be SMS, or it can be an email, or it can be a webhook request, which alerts can send to, and then you can take reactive actions. On the other side, it can also publish data to a Power BI dashboard where you can have historic view of everything, what has been happening with the application. There is a full integration with Visual Studio, so you can do real-time streaming of all the messages which are going into Application Insight. There are REST APIs from where you can even consume all these Application Insight telemetries and messages and everything. And obviously, the you can also export it out at regular schedules. So you can export it out into blob storage or Azure storage, or even a consolidated file which you can consume at your side. So I think so that's all on the theory side. Let's jump into the real stuff, and I'll just give you a walkthrough. So in order to understand it much better, and beyond this tech thing, which I personally too don't like much, I would what I did was I created a sample application, and what this application does in a nutshell is it's quite straightforward, and this is something which I'm using for my personal use. So I'm doing a web crawling sort of activity, which I think so it's quite regular. So I'm trying to get on one of the websites. I'm trying to extract data at regular interval, and then I have set up some internal logic that if something happens for a specific item, then you should notify me through an email. So just to be a bit more clear, I'm just scraping a e-commerce website for shoes, and then if the shoe price goes to a specific limit, then I get email notification for all the shoes which are lying in that specific pricing range. So I think that's a separate piece. What I want to focus at this in this session is about how I have used application insight and telemetries. So to start with, one of the fundamental things which you will need, and I'm showing you a C sharp example. You can have heaps and heaps of code is available for JavaScript, Ruby, .NET, Ruby, Java, or any other language which you are comfortable with. So on the C sharp side, what you would need is the first and the most primary thing is you need to consume the application insight NuGet package. So once you use that, then you have all the application insight good stuff available in your application. Uh, Now, once you have that, then what I've done is I've just created a separate class which is called application insight helper. You can inbuild you can engross the same code in your application uh, just at every place you want to, but I've just tried to centralize it so that I don't have to repeat the same code at multiple places. Okay, so let's have a quick walkthrough about this centralized class which I've created for App Insight. Now, what I've been looking into in respect to this particular application is three specific entities which App Insight looks for. So one of the entities is called App Insight events. So all the events, that's what I am planning to send through this particular transaction. If I want to send any event related message, if I want to send a regular trace telemetry, then I would send it through the trace telemetry process. And as you can see, there are dedicated methods for each of that. So there's a trace event, track event, and the third one which I'm looking into is app inside exception. So if my application has any exceptions, it should flow through the exception process method into the application inside. Now I'll just quickly show you how easy it is to just embed this particular code in the app inside implementation into your code. So let's look into the trace first. So if you can see over here, I have this one simple code which is doing all the magic. So if you see over here, I'm using model, and this is all very specific to my application. It's not something which App Insight expects for, but in order to make it a bit more structured, I've just used a model. So you can make it a straight a single line of code, and then that would also work fine for the implementation. Now what I've done is I've just tried to make it more fleshy. So I have operation ID, operation type which I'm sending. Then there is a type, so it's a trace type, and the trace type is basically used over here to pass it to the relevant if condition. The other one is I'm passing the payload, that's where the meat is, and then I am passing a correlation ID and correlation time ID. That's for my own personal reference. I'll show you what this particular these things would help in when we go to the Azure portal side. But these are really important because it brings in the hook, which would help you in identifying the entire transaction executed by an application in a specific run. Now on that's a trace request, and if we go into the exception, as I said, I have been using the try and catch blocks. So in the catch block, before I throw an exception, what I do is I just put a app inside exception request, and then I just do the same. So I part the exception object, and also the correlation ID and correlation time ID. That's for building the hook between the entire transaction process. So on the code, there's nothing much more. What I'll show you next would be Azure Portal. Now this is the real thing. So this is what App Insight looks like. So what I've done is I've provisioned App Insight, which is called as Smart Alert Insight, and this is a service I provisioned of through the Azure Portal. You can see there is a wide range of options which are available in the service. What I'll be representing today would be mostly around the application level features. I think there are a lot of other features which are related to event session and stuff, which we can explore in another session. But for now, let's walk through and have a look around the application level things. So the first and foremost thing which I'll share with you is about the connection thing. So we basically use this connection string ID, and that's the key which help us in identifying the entire application inside instance from the code. So I'm referring the same key in my code. Now the other thing is about the activity. So these are the regular stuff which you'll find in every Azure PaaS service: activity log, access control tags, and stuff. Now this is the interesting ones which are very specific. You'll find an application inside. So in order to investigate, you have a couple of options. You have application map. I'll show you what that looks like. You have smart detection. You have live metrics. You have failures, and you have performance, and also the server related stuff. So let's go, let's check a couple of these. So the first one I'll just walk you through will be the application map. And this is really, really interesting. When I saw it first time, I was just blown away. Now what it shows is, so you see over here, this is our smart alert app. So that's the app. What I'll do is I'll try to run it through a 3 days window so that we get more detail. So as soon as I do that, now what you're seeing over here is just a map of what my application does. So if you remember, when we do the design of application, we draw a lot of diagrams about what is talking to what and all that stuff. But this is something which comes off the shelf with Application Insight. So you just connect your telemetries, and App Insight will do the magic for you and design the entire flow process and the connectivity. So what you're seeing on the screen, and there are different ways how you can present it. So that's a line, that's a organic view, and this is basically a hierarchical view. Now in this view, what you're seeing, this is my Smart Alert app, and it is talking to a couple of things. So there is a Sketcher website. As I said, I'm scrolling a e-commerce website, and then we have App Insight. A lot of stuff is happening between them, and then we have this SendGrid, which is another Azure service I'm using for sending emails in case of the particular logic is successful is coming as true, and then we find some particular item which are in the specific filtering range. Now what you see on this is we have smart app, and it shows a lot of stuff. So if I click on that, it gives me a very high level analytical view of there are a number of gets. So the gets are almost taking an average of 38.1 millisecond, and those gets are mostly, I think, so when we make a request to HTTP endpoint, those are the average time which is used for executing. And the Sketcher sale, that's the email which we are sending, and it is on an average taking 2.7 milliseconds. So it's quite quickly. You can see what sort of things are happening. Then it also shows about the number of calls which I've been having in the last 3 days. So 37 calls which are going to inside App Insight. We have around 2.6 thousand calls which are getting executed from the app. And also you can see there are around two calls which were like two emails which were sent in last 3 days. And if I go and stretch it up for last 7 days, you will see the number of calls and stuff will definitely change. So you see you have 120 calls, you have 1.4 thousand, 1.4 thousand calls which came to Application Insight, and the Smart App did call around 5.9 thousand calls. So it's quite quick glimpse will give you a high level understanding of how your application is set up and connected. Now the next interesting one is I'll come to this failures. So when you click on that, it basically shows the number of failures which would have happened in a specific time which you have selected over here. Now at this stage it's just showing last 24 hours. Let's make it 3 days. It will be more dense then. Yeah, you can see we had a lot of failures which were happening between this time at 12:35 to 6 p.m. And yeah, so it was having a couple of issues, and it was around like Monday to, so that's, I think so, yesterday we were having a lot of errors which were happening. And you can see there is a count of around 3.19 thousand errors which have happened since in past 3 days. So that's really really good one. The other one which I think so we would love to see would be around the performance side of things. So you can see operation time. It basically shows an average of the operation activity. So this is request count, which is number of requests which are happening. You can change it to CPU, and obviously once we need to change the window so that we get a better graph. So that's the CPU, that's the average memory. It shows yeah, there was a little bit of hit which happened at this time. Over here if you come, you can see again the same things. So it's like get and Sketcher sale. That's the email, and that's the HTTP endpoint which is getting triggered. You get the number of the count of number of requests, and also the average duration which that particular request took. So in a nutshell, quite detailed. You get a brief overview what all is happening inside your application without configuring any single thing. As you can see, it's doing all of that off the shelf for you. All right, so that's what we have on the operation side. This also shows the dependency side of things. So you can see these are the different endpoints which I'm trying to process, and then this is the send grid which I talked about, which we are using for sending emails. Now, if we go back to the operations and if we go into the insights, you can see we have we can have a detailed sample view of the insights as well. So if I click on that, then what I'm seeing over here is this is the one of the execution which happened, and it shows basically the end-to-end transaction, and this is the operation ID. So if you remember, I showed you in the very beginning the correlation ID we were using in the code. So this correlation ID, so that's the beauty. Once you pass this correlation ID, you are able to hook your entire transaction with one correlation ID, and I'll show you how you can query that entire transaction and get the full view of what happened in a particular transaction. So getting back to this, the next one is, again, let's not go to servers because I haven't configured it. What we can see next is maybe live streaming. Now this is a really awesome feature which I have seen in the Application Insight. Now what this does is it basically gives you a very real-time visualization of your application at any point in time. So since I've enabled this, you can see I'm having a very low CPU utilization there are no exceptions. Dependency call, that's the dependency call, what it is referring to is the call between the application and the endpoint, HTTP endpoint, that is Sketchers endpoint, or the call between HTTP application and SendGrid. So all that is quite flat out, nothing is happening. And what I have done is, and you can see this is the real server where my application is running, the crawler application. I've deployed it as a web job on this particular on Azure App Service, and that app service is running on this particular server, which is managed and controlled by Azure. So you can see we have no requests, the failure are zeros. CPU is just 3%, which I think so would be just the utilization the machine would be taking in. And the memory is around 42 MB, which is committed for this particular app. So now to see some magic happening, what I'll show you is I have written a simple script. Now this script, what it is doing is it will basically trigger the same app locally on my machine, and it will basically create 10 instances of it. Now when that happens, ideally it should start presenting some more sharp graphs over here, and some stuff should be visible because of these that intense 10 app running in parallel at the same time. What I'll do is I'll just quickly run this, and in a while we should see some actions. So now this script is executed and the apps are started. So I'll just quickly drag a couple of these instances because it got open on my second screen. So okay, yep, my bad. So there is some exceptions which happened. That's fine. Well, I know why that happened, so let me just quickly fix that. It is because my machine is outside of the internet, so I'll just connect it to the internet and hopefully it should be fine now. So what I'll do is I'll just run this again, and these apps are getting triggered. So I have 10 instances of app running, and hopefully it should not create an exception this time. I think so that's enough. I have 10 instances, something similar to what you're seeing on the screen, but yeah, there are 10 of those running. So the service has started, and yeah, now the interesting bit, what you can see just front over here, is the change in the graphs. So you can see the CPU utilization is just going up. It got like skyrocketed to 100%, and you can even see the memory is also going to almost like, oh, it's going around 21 gigs. That's really intense. So these 10 instances are just overkilling the application inside server, because it's like bombarding all the messages for all the instances. So just one of the instance I'm opening over here, so all the notifications which you're seeing on the screen are just floating in real time to this app inside. And if you can see, there are dependency calls which are happening, so there are these peaks which are coming in, and there should also be some call durations which should come. Yeah, so if you see, there are a couple of dots which are coming over here, which are more about the dependency calls which are happening. And yeah, so let me, okay, so yeah, so that's so as you see, as I showed you, there are a couple of endpoints which the application is executing. So one of the endpoint is this one, so it's still executing. It's not that slow when I'm running a single instance, but yeah, I'm just killing the system at this stage by running multiple instances. As you can see on the screen, the CPU and everything is just dying. So what I'll do is I'll just release these stuff because they are just they are just they are even killing my local machine because so many instances are running at the same time. So I'll just close them. Okay, so close all windows. Now I have shut down all the instances which were running on my screen, and you'll see there is a drop. So that's the drop. Now you can see this is so beautiful. Like in real time, you can see all that magic happening, and this is what I'm running locally on my machine. Just consider a scenario where you have a production application which is like getting bombarded with the users, and then you can in real time see what sort of things are getting challenged. So as you can see, I saw my CPU was getting killed with all the different messages going out, and then my memory was also low. So what this leads to is you can analyze quickly and go and upscale or scale up or scale out your infrastructure so that it can cope up with the demand. Or the other better option is you can place alerts, and then you can even have automation which would auto scale the system so that you don't need to do anything manually. So that's the live metrics part of things. Now let's go to the other segment, which is the most interesting one, and I enjoy it the most. So I've been showing you a lot of stuff around different things which we can publish at the application insight side. So what we are publishing from this application is exceptions. We are doing trace. We are doing events. But application insight is much broader than that. So if you see over here, this is the you can imagine it's a data repository side of application insight. uh, in a simple word, these are like sort of tables which you can see over here. So these are not like SQL tables, they are a different persistent system. But what you can do is you can definitely write queries on top of it. So if we just go through a couple of these, so this is the trace where I'm publishing my trace events, trace messages. This is custom event. So if you want to have custom messages that you want to publish to application insight from your application, that you can do. Page view, these are some industry standard keywords. Page view, this is for data collection when the user comes to a web page. So as soon as the page load basically sends a notification that anonymous user or logged in user has come on the page. So it sends a telemetry for that. So these are the dependencies which I was talking about in our application. It's the send grid and the HTTP request which we are making outside. This is the exception which I am logging, where I'm logging my exceptions and stuff. Availability results, these are mostly internal metrics, custom metrics, and performance counters and all that stuff. These are basically the machine level things which are like CPU, RAM, and all that stuff, which we were just saying all the good things about things getting shooting out and all that stuff. So what you can do is you can write your custom query, as I said. And what I've done is I've also written one, and also the good part is you can store those queries in the portal itself. So if I go and open one of my queries, so that's the trace query I wrote. And writing these queries are not complex. And just to be clear on the query side, these are not T-SQL queries. These are queries which are called as Custo queries. Custo queries are basically a platform which Microsoft has onboarded throughout the Azure ecosystem, and every place where you can have the capability of querying any of the Azure resource, you can do that using a Custo query. So for application insight, using accessing these repositories are very easy using the Custo query. It almost is very similar to SQL, just a small difference in the indentation and the way how query is written. So what I'm talking about over here is, okay, first I'll show you something. So this is a normal trace query, and by default when you click on any of these icons, it will write this query automatically for you. So over here it's getting a 50 record set for me. And if I look into the results, what I can see over here is I have these different messages which have come in, and these messages have come from the application, and I can just show you. So if I come to my application, say, or maybe I'll take something which is there on the yeah, execute start sales service. Yeah. So if I come to my program, say, so if you see, that's the message which was published into the trace. And if I come over here and if I see, so we were publishing it into an app inside trace. So that message got published, and that message is what is available over here. Now the thing which I showed you about the correlation ID. So those correlation IDs are basically the operation ID and operation and correlation time is what we have over here. Where is that? Oh yeah, yeah. So timestamp is the correlation time which we are passing. So using this same correlation ID, so I'll just take this maybe. Maybe I'll not run the save period right. So what I'll do is it's very simple. Everything is autocomplete as Microsoft is expert with that. I don't need to write anything, just enter, enter, and everything comes up. So I'll just say I need operation ID, and that would be, and it also shows that whether you want to be equal or not equal or whatever. So that's operation ID. This equal, that's not equal, has, contains. It says all the possible features which you can get in a query language. And then you pass this the correlation ID, and then I'll do another one in order to organize my data. So I'll say order by, yep, sorry, order by, and I'll do timestamp, and I'll say yes, I'll do ascending. So I'll just run this query and hopefully we get the results. So if you see over here, uh, we have got some really good results, and what it shows is it shows us order by descending, so it shows from top to bottom how my application ran, and that's only possible because I did send these correlation ID from my application and also a timestamp which was coming from the application. So as my application executed line by line, these messages were logged in, and then I'm able to retrieve them. So at any point of time I can go back and see a specific or ID which I did send, what was the execution challenges or execution stuff happened. So it gives the end-to-end processing for the specific operation ID. It has like a lot of details. So if you see, it gives me the application version coming from from the DLL which is getting created. It says the client type because I ran it from the PC. It's PC, and it also shows my location. That's really interesting. It shows me that I'm from New South Wales. I have executed this. It's in Australia. It shows the machine as well, and yeah, so it shows the app name. That's something which I'm passing from the application itself. Oh no, that's a Smart Alert Insight. So that's a application insight name, and that it also shows the .NET version and everything. So yeah, lot of details around that. And if there was an exception, it would have shown that. So let's now go to the exception table. And yeah, if we run this again, let's take the operation ID. Uh, yep, so let's take this operation ID and let's go back to the query. So to see the beauty, it has all the queries which I'm writing. It's opening in tabs, so at any time I can go to any of the queries and just make the change and run it. Something similar to what we do in any of the management studio stuff, whether for SQL or any other technology. So what you can see is it shows the detail about the exceptions. So it's showing that there was oh, I ran it on the trace, sorry. So I'll come to the exception and I'll say okay, okay, maybe it got stuck. Yep, that's fine. So I'll just come to this. All right, so my Chrome is dying now. It's a bit not good. Okay, so it's running the query. When I go back, I'll say where operation ID equals to this. And if I run this, I get there are two exceptions, and if I drill down to these exceptions, it will show me that yeah, no connection is available for the service to for no connection is available to service this operation exists cell model M. So what this error is, it's about the caching service, the Redis cache, which I'm using. And because, as I said, my internet was not available, so it just pushed a exception. And this is the best thing. I didn't do it deliberately, but yeah, that error, that particular internet issue was really helpful because now we can see there is an exception as well, which is coming out. So oh sorry, that's more about you can write queries and extract out the information whatever you want. And the last thing which I wanted to show is about the alerts. So this is one of the really good feature which you will see in most of the services and same comes with application inside. So what you can do is you can set up alerts. So what it's saying is you have a resource smart alert inside and you're creating an alert on top of it. You are saying that it's asking for a condition. So what I'll say is if there are exceptions and I need to select. So it's just the good stuff which you'll find in all the alerting, all the services where you can put an alert. The alert, this is Azure Alert, which is common for all the services. So what I'm saying over here is if there is an exception which is greater than not a maximum of 10, and in 5 minutes every 1 minute it will check that, and that is what is the condition is. And then next is what action should it do when the condition is met. So I'll say text code group and short name text code group, and then I'll say send an email as soon as something like that happens, and then I'll say email me. And obviously, I'll have to provide my email address, so which will be something like this. And I'll say okay, and I'll say okay, and that should be good. And the last few things is we need to set up alert rule name. So THG text out rule, and yep, and that's it. Once I click the create, it will basically create an alert rule for me. And next time, whenever the exception happens in next, yeah, as soon as the exception happens in next 10 minutes, 10 minutes, if there are 10 exception in 5 minutes, it will basically initiate this particular alert and I'll get an email that errors or exceptions are happening. So I believe this is a really great service, and I would highly recommend people to use this. I think so it can be well set for this, so that it's the unsung hero sort of service. It's been there. Most of the people I've talked to, they are not much aware about it. I believe the time of has long gone when people used to manage all their logs on VMs and then managing the storage, managing all the complications with space going short and all that stuff. This just brings in the magic for you, and you'll just forget about managing all those stuff, and then everything is on the fly for you. And then obviously you have a very quick and detailed insight of whatever is happening under the hood inside the black box, and you can see it, analyze it, and instead of doing a reactive action on your challenges, you can do a proactive action. So it's definitely helpful. Hope this video helped you and was of any use for you. I'm pretty sure you should start using Azure Application Insight going forward in your coming projects.